Good evening. It's so nice to see so many of you here, especially on such a rainy night, right? But what better thing to do on a rainy night than listen to three amazing poets? And we're really, really honored to have them here. They're all visiting today too. So it's really nice to have three out-of-town poets and then a room full of people, as well as everyone on Zoom as well. So my name is Steven Karl. I'll do the introductions. I'll keep them short because we're all here to slip into the wonderful world of these poets. I'll read all of the introductions now, and then the poets can just come up and do their thing and don't have to worry about me interrupting the flow. So the first poet I'll introduce will be Bill Carty. Bill Carty is the author of two collections of poetry, We Sailed on the Lake and Huge Cloudy, and copies of We Sailed on the Lake are over there. And then he holds degrees from Dartmouth College and the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and has received poetry fellowships from Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Artist Trust, Hugo House, Jack Straw. He was awarded the 2017 Emily Dickinson Award from the Poetry Society of America. Carty's poems are full of observations, questions that lead to explorations, overheard snippets of conversation at the local coffee shop. The settings in his poems are often reminiscent both of the coastal towns in Maine, as well as the rugged beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Bill's visiting us here from Seattle. And often when I'm reading his poems, I find that I'm picturing sort of a Maine landscape that then quickly switches to a Seattle landscape. As I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, so it's pretty easy to do that shift, but grew up on the East Coast. So I have both of those in my mind. The poet Rob McLean wrote this about Carty's debut book: a collection of narrative twists and jolts, shifting perspectives and unexpected takes. Carty jostles the familiar and unfamiliar alike in such subtle, jarring ways, opening the question of whether whatever we thought was true or real might ever have been in the first place. So before I move on to the next poet, I want to leave you with just an excerpt, just 4 stanzas. They're written in tercets from one of Carty's poems, one of my favorite poems. It's a newer one. Maybe we'll get to hear the whole thing tonight. I don't know. But it's called Greenspan. And one of the things I want you just to sort of tune into, because it's what I love most about a lot of his poems, notice how the verbs engine the poem both into wander and wonder, and he's able to sort of keep that hinge where the poem wanders along, and then we're also sort of filled with the wonder as the poem accumulates, and the verbs just drive them through. And so I'm just going to leave you with just a little bit of this to whet your palate. Wanted something, lost it, then found it in the yield curve, sensed the future's plotted swoon or swag, one lone drunk sipping from the mermaid fountain, dark rush of clocks. Come to coerce evening, that misnomer, show me the day that really ended at the level. I view the graph from above, its line now, last red streak in the sky. Okay. You guys can't wait to hear him read now, right? And then next, I'll turn our attention to our next reader. And this is really fun because Bill and Paul are traveling together from Seattle, and we're kind of lucky to have both of them here tonight. So Paul Hlava Ceballos is the author of Banana, and then you'll see the book's right there. It's the winner of the AWP Donald Hall Prize for Poetry, the Poetry Society of America's Norma Farber First Book Award, and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. His fellowships have been from CantoMundo, Artist Trust, the Poets House. He's also been featured in the Poetry Magazine podcast, which is really wonderful. It's hosted by Susie F. Garcia, who's a wonderful poet. My second book is on Noemi. She was actually my assistant editor for that. So a lot of Susie love if people are out there. Yeah, Susie's great. So definitely listen to the podcast. It's easily, you can easily find it. And another super cool thing about his work is that it's been translated into Ukrainian. So his book uses a collage of government documents, news reports, racist tweets, photos, and video stills that he found during his many years of research. I think in one interview I read that you were sort of working on the book for about 8 years. So a lot of arduous research, and that love comes through in the book. In an interview with The Stranger, he said, "The banana is just a symbol for an extractive economic method, the extraction of resources by the global north from the global south. And not just resources, but labor as well, which is directly connected to immigration and a national consciousness." And then during a podcast, Ode and Psyche, which he recently did with another poet, Bianca Stone, he speaks about seeing the life and death of the migrants on emails, listservs, social media, and sort of feeling the hurt of that real violence being done to the migrants at the border. But then he goes on to speak about the disconnect of moving through the world, such as going to work and feeling as if that didn't exist, noting the privilege of some of his co-workers to ignore and not acknowledge. I think one of the most difficult but yet truly moving aspects of his brilliant book is Paul also attempts to reckon with his own complicity. And it's amazing how you did. I don't know how you did, but it's absolutely amazing to sort of have that level of honesty there. And I'm sure it'll happen to each one of us once we hear Paul read, and then the next time you reach for a banana and begin to peel away its skin. Will you dwell on the suffering, the lives lost, the exploited lands and its forced servitude for greed, those who have been forgotten? Banana gives testimony and honor to those who have gone unnoticed, erased, for those who did not have the time, resources, nor audience to speak of the suffering. With this tremendous book, he brings the lives and this reality into this world, our world, with humility and honor. And then our last reader, I'm super lucky to introduce. She's a dear friend of mine. So I've been lucky enough to have the experience, both the genius and generosity of J. Mae for many years. J. Mae Barizo was born in Toronto to Filipino immigrants, is a poet, essayist, and multidisciplinary artist who works at the intersections of poetics, media, and performance. She is the author of 2 books of poetry, Tender Machines, also over at the counter, and The Cumulus Effect. Her work has been anthologized and books published by W.W. Norton, Antler Editions, Harvard University Press. Might have maybe heard about them, they're kind of right there. And she's on the board of Kundiman, an organization supporting writers and readers from the Asian diaspora. She's on the MFA faculty of the New School and lives in New York City. In an interview with Multiverse Podcast, Barizo said, "As a classically trained pianist and violinist, I always have this framework of rhythm and meter." Barizo's wondrous poems and both collections give us backstage glimpses into the lives of performers, often musicians, the titillation and tension of traversing geographies and their cultural inclinations. Her book is a constant mapping of desires, their youthful teases and the adult concerns, an examination of the role of women, oftentimes mothers and daughters, and the intertwined dailiness of their lives, while the city continues to hum on even during COVID lockdowns. I return to this idea of framework, for I feel that when one reads one of Mae's poems, we are gifted a musical score articulated in words, lines, enjambment, white space, and of course, most important to music, silence. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way, and I can't wait to hear all of these poets. And I thank all of you and James, of course, and Grolier Poetry for making this space available for all of us tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's Stephen go. Thank you for those introductions, Stephen. I'm glad you did all three at once because I was like, whoa, oh God, now I have to read. That was so, so generous. Thank you. Thank you, Grolier, James, for having us. Bella, right? Thank you for we sailed on the lake here and Bella helped design it. So that's really alongside a college friend. So this is really special. It's a beautiful book. Thank you for all your work. I keep changing my mind as to what I want to read. I will read. I'm going to read a poem from Huge Cloudy. This was my first book. It's kind of out of print. It's unclear, really. But I am able occasionally to find copies on Walmart.com. So if you seek, you can find it. You never know what's going to be written inside, but if I don't beat you to it, you might find it there. I'll read maybe this short poem. I think I came to Grolier once in like 2001. So it's good to be back. It's a beautiful space. I was thinking like about the elevation, the verticalness is great. Actually, one time somebody who gave like a talk on public speaking was like, you have to look into the four corners of the room before you read. I'm like, they're like 9 quarters. I don't know if I can hit them all up here, but anyway, this is a poem about return. It's called Grace Then Meat. I split wood for the next lessee. It's a gift without reward. Some people promise a thank you card. That's how they ask for a gift. I prefer a street encounter. Someone says, "You are back." I say, "You are back too." They reply, "But I haven't gone anywhere." And I wink. Our secret. Okay, I'm going to read the first. I'm kind of following Stephen's lead here. I'm going to just read from the beginning of the book and start with the first poem. It has the first line was written by my daughter, who said, "I'm going to write a poem one day." And she said, "Bear took a walk in the woods and found a banana," which is a poem unto itself. And this is in no way an improvement. It's an elaboration, I suppose, and an homage. Poem. Bear took a walk in the woods and found a banana. He liked the ring of it. It was a telephone. He thought it nice to chase that sound. A parrot from a palm said, "Over there," in French, and made bananas dear to him. What? Through language he had never spoken? There were many words for the words he was given. There was Baba and Nana. There was living far and living near. There was the trick of making this from that, which felt like a rush, like he'd hardly been a cub at all. Was never told, "Don't put that in your mouth." Or, young again, had finally learned to part honeybee from its sting. So his heart went bring, bring through the forest, and we are left to hear it leave like a laugh does, or be left like a rind. Right. Next poem in the book, the second poem is called Greenspan. And so this is like the private joke in this poem and the next poem is that I was like trying to, no judgment, but I was trying to, I came upon last names of like political, economic leaders who I didn't find to be personally inspiring, but were, like out there in the world. So this is Greenspan and the next one's Garland. We're just sort of like living in an ineffectual space. This was kind of pre, the Supreme Court thing. That was the era of the Garland poem. But beautiful last names I found. And so this is kind of like a poem. This poem is a Seattle set poem, kind of walking from Pike Place Market, like up, rising from the waterfront up into the city itself. Greenspan. Wanted something, lost it, then found it in the yield curve. Sensed the future's plotted swoon or swag. One lone drunk sipping from the mermaid fountain. Dark rush of clocks come to coerce evening. That misnomer. Show me the day that really ended at the level. I view the graph from above. It's a line now. Last red streak in the sky before some recession settles beneath the concrete benches of the esplanade. It's cold. A couple leans on the rail. Are they taking a picture or looking at a picture they've just taken? Orange vesters clog the path ahead. To be safely seen or out to sell. I want to know exactly what I'm looking at. Neon blue sign in the window of the vision clinic. Song from shop speakers as I pass. One of those gold standards in which love must have been invented. I'm down here, below the city, above water, climbing into the arcade where I refuse to make a purchase. I'm not carrying anything home tonight. No one I know is sick enough for balloons, or if they're sick, they're not telling. Of course, the answer is always flowers. Who wouldn't mind some life in this room the leaves blow into? What do you call it? Some say foyer, but it's nothing so romantic. Just one door with another door beyond it. This poem is called Garland. Kind of inspired by, I was watching the film version of The Age of Innocence, the Scorsese movie, and maybe even reading like the notes or something. And there's a reference to enfiladed rooms, which are basically one room and then a doorway, and then the next room and a doorway, and then the next room. So it kind of echoes the previous poem. I didn't realize that until I'm just saying it right now. But I didn't think about the doorway nature of it. But yeah, so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about like when have I ever kind of experienced that, and it kind of led me to like a party in an art gallery, as happens. But this is called Garland. All books have gifts. This book gives me enfiladed rooms. Yes, how terrible to be locked in boxes, but when one room is strung upon the next, I want to walk further into the party until it opens on the rail yard. There goes the last commuter. It's been a long day considering all we dressed up for. And where's the slim credenza of my mislaid cocktail? Tomorrow too, still waiting where we left it, like a list to walk into. I lift an imagined drink in empty hand as we move backward through the festivities, so concerned with elbows, I hardly notice faces. Okay, this poem is called Outer Lands. This is a poem that is an imaginary landscape, sometimes in Massachusetts, in Cape Cod, sometimes in Washington. It was kind of like those memories of different places came together in coastal environments, and then looking at the internet on my phone. That's where it ends. It's like starts off in a beautiful landscape, and then just ends in the phone, ends in the portal. But I had a fellowship in Provincetown at I think maybe 10. I should know because it was a year the Red Sox won the World Series. It was 2014, I think. So 2014, 15, 2013, 13. Thanks, Dad. Oh yeah. Thanks to my parents for coming down with the name. Fact checkers, editor, sports fact checker. Everybody plays their role in getting these poems out in the world. So this is 2014. Yeah, so like 10 years ago. And I came back a few years after that, right around September, and I was walking up by the Lay House and just kind of passed somebody who'd been there at the same time as me, going in the other direction. I was like, what are you doing here? It was just a funny occurrence, and then started to write that into a poem. Outer Lands. I'll tell you the story. I was walking the outer edge of the outer lands, where sporadic signs staked in dunes warned to keep distant from the mammals. In fact, there are critical acts in place to enforce non-molestation, but between me and the sea, a seal appeared to be having a time of it, rocked and moaned in a deepening birth, as if trying to summon momentum to roll down the beach toward the water. In short, it seems stuck, and it's never far off in the imagination, dying. I thought I should bring sea to the seal. I filled a detergent bottle at the surf and called the seal Buddy. You okay, buddy? I said, as the tide went this way, then that, with no sense of intention. An hour before, I had encountered a friend on this beach, both of us having walked through our past to that moment. Now, he was gone, and I was supposed to be in the mountains, but the mountains were on fire. From the highway that morning, I watched smoke plumes rise in each far valley and drove past my exit, straight for the coast, straight into the story where I gathered armloads of kelp, making a damp bed for the seal. Increasingly, my efforts bore the whiff of not science, but ritual. I consulted the experts I wasn't too embarrassed to ask. On my phone, I found a video of a seal snared at ocean shores. 2 cops hunched above it, jabbing at tangled fishing lines with utility knives as the animal lurched, as the cops jolted from its teeth. A crowd in sweaters gathered as the camera narrowed to tattooed flames on a bicep clenched around the seal. Beyond this, straggling clouds from Constable on the horizon, bright lights at their edges reflected in mud. Then one officer moved toward the SUV, retrieving a club, I feared, though he returned with a stick and wire loop, one for the dogs they don't shoot, presumably. He fastened the catch at the seal's neck and drove its head into sand until the body stilled, suddenly submissive. What looked like choking wasn't this time, and the line was cut, and the catch was loose, and the seal's arched back bounded for ocean. The algorithm urged me further. A sea otter pup rescued by blonde hero in board shorts, a stranded whale in Weymouth, a lone porpoise found in a British farmer's field 50 miles from the ocean. Here's the thing. I was looking at the way things had happened in the world for evidence of how the world would happen, which never works. Each day bears its crucial variance. And I knew this, practically had it written on a coffee mug. But when I was there, and when there was then, I had to say stop and let red fill the harbor and let red wash the shore and vow never to touch another living thing for fear of how my being human might kill it. All right, I'm going to read one more poem. Paul and I went to the I'm going to read one more. Paul and I went to the Ruth Stone House and we made broadsides. And so we have a small stack of broadsides that you're welcome to take away. It's very, very kind of them to make them for us and send us on our way. And this is the poem in my broadside, and I folded down the corner and now I can't find it. But it, good Lord. This has overheard. This is one of my poems where after the, the mid-pandemic, I don't know, I started to go coffee shops and I started to, I knew this collection needed some shorter poems. There are 5 or 6 really long poems within the collection, and I needed shorter poems to kind of fill those gaps. And I would go to coffee shops. I would sit next to people who looked like they were talking to each other. And I would take out my phone, I'd put a book on the table. I'd take out my phone, open the notes app, and just write down everything they said as quickly as I could. And then, kind of shape those into poems. And so there are a handful of poems in here that have that like literal overheard language with like some of my own memories coming into the poem as well. So it's a mix. Some of them are strictly overheard, but this one is a little bit of a mixture. How to Walk in the Snow. I've done a demonstration where I head directly across the lake to the market and meet Mike, who I haven't seen in ages. Last fall, he was living on a commune, but just bought a house by the river. He's happy. Now he's trying to commercialize that as well. He has a company. What kind exactly? I don't know. Sometimes I really listen. Sometimes all talk is an insubstantial flurry. I relace my boots and head back out. It's almost like to cross the lake. You've got to make each step pertain to water. Okay, thank you.
Hey, what's up, everybody? How y'all doing?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so thanks so much, Grolier, for having us. James, Jamie, I'm so excited to hear you read. Friends, for coming out. Those parents. Yeah, this book, Banana. A lot of this kind of came from this place where I was feeling this grief of violence against Latino people, both physical and in language, right? And just kind of wanting to like shake folks and be like, but look. So, there is a lot of violence and death in these poems. I want to say that to start, but only as much as is in the world that we live in. This first poem that I'm going to read, Nogales Entry, I guess I'm kind of thinking of it as like an entry, like for an encyclopedia, but also an entry point, in a border. And it includes 3 pieces of found text, because a lot of this book is documentation. So the 3 pieces of found text are from, I'll do air quotes, from gunbroker.com. I went to that website. The second one is from the Oxford English Dictionary, and then the third is from the Tucson Sentinel, which had testimony of the accused shooter, who was a Customs Border Patrol agent that shot a child through the fence who was playing on the opposite side of the border. So this is Nogales Entry, Elegy for Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez. 1. Salary. Sal, re, sol, salt. A salt wage. Assault rifles for sale online. Real Border Patrol rifles used in action. Wages for sale for real assault. Real sales waged for salt. 2. A border agent has agency. Noun, plural. border agents, as in boards of agents will border agents. Agent, a person who acts on behalf of. A person who acts on behalf of, to behalf of. 3, the boy's hands appeared to hold rocks. Appeared, not appear. Up here are no rocks to hold. Hold up. Hands appear. Hands hold the boy up. And if I was, kind of trying to like show people who aren't in the media or the archives, I thought I would maybe start in my own hometown. This is a kind of a poem dedicated to somebody I grew up with. And I was also thinking about naming and how naming for, Latinx people, a lot of like BIPOC folk, their name comes from, the conqueror, plantation owner, killer. So this is Eric Cortez. In a lineage of effects, proud scrapper who threw fists to fools that dissed us little ones, you failed only what teachers made you do, and thrived in gripped communion of backyard weight bench, where a head nod was more than history gave you. When I made honor roll, you beamed. When I woke in sudden spotlights and looked out the blinds, grit and flack of the ghetto birds, quick updraft blessed your name. Fuck how they tagged you, conqueror cuffed and put away. There was no Cortez before you. Maybe I'll read the second part of that too. I was writing that poem, and then after I wrote that poem, what kind of like made me write it is I was working at a coffee shop at the time. It was Madison Park, Seattle. It's like a very kind of fancy neighborhood. This young kid in this coffee shop next to the country club comes in, and he's like, Madison Park gang. And I'm just like, all right. But it made me kind of think of Eric Cortez, right? And maybe kind of two very different worlds. So this is Eric Cortez too. Like a monument you tower. Your rough fist knocked your flat brim up to lean in and give a hard hug. Weed in pocket and cops on prowl. You were one brawl from expulsion. Now, behind cafe registers, near country club and lake, I see young boys' dumb awkwardness. One kicks shares and shouts, Madison Park gang? I say nothing, because I know my job's value here. But I think of your chubby chin, your chubby smile and smooth chin, Looney Tunes t-shirt and 2 big jeans, cinched tight against a lean future. Yeah, maybe I'll get into the title poem. I'll do a little bit from that. The title poem, Banana. This is kind of hard to read from because it's 40 pages. And as Carl mentioned, it took 8 years for me to research this. It's a collage. Every line comes from a separate source text. There are 296 different sources, all of which are on my website. Very kind of meticulously is a lot. Yeah, so this more or less traces the history of bananas in the Americas. The history of bananas in the Americas is, of course, the history of colonialism, slavery, land theft, then and now. And yeah, every line comes from a separate source text, going back to botanical and agricultural documents from the 1700s, 20th century declassified CIA documents, recipes, commercials. Every time you hear the word banana, you could hear it's a new line. For example, maybe I'll start with this one. The first line here comes from a CIA document where they were just writing up what was happening with unionization in South America. There's hundreds of these. And then this handwritten part in the book was used in a Supreme Court case in which Chiquita was found guilty of funding the AUC, which is a nationally recognized terrorist organization. And it was a handwritten note from a private meeting in Chiquita. To develop new banana exports, the military junta, in a series of decrees, prepared ceremonial dishes of bananas and honored the cadaver and consuming the charred and crushed bones in a banana mush, ousted the president and installed military officers with ties to banana plantations. And do we want to ship bananas from Colombia? Need to keep this very confidential. People can get killed. On dead banana leaf or inflorescence tissues, they disperse by wind and water. Knives, dull knives or ragged cuts during dehanding of banana farmers who grow banana fruits. After deflowering fingers, cut banana workers with a banana knife, cutting at soil level and filling the base with kerosene. It has 10 hands, they will cut off one hand. There was a commercial aspect of banana workers left sterile from handling. Nematicides used in banana. Banana market opened, a well-developed banana spathe. In banana-producing regions soared. Banana stalks rose through a deep tangle of limbs. Mixture oozes from the severed crown. Banana growers bring a song about banana. I try to hide under the banana leaves when I hear the planes. I'm going to skip kind of the say her name section. It's 5 pages of assassinated union leaders and indigenous people just in the past 10 years in South America. I haven't ever come across a list like that before in my research, so I compiled it here, but it's maybe a lot to get into for a brief reading. So the bunches of bananas were so large that sometimes it was really difficult for me to remove the banana flowers from the bananas at the top of the bunch. I had to stand on tiptoes. I want to read this because this part is also hard to read, but I'm just going to do it. So there's lots of different sections in here. This particular section, if the form was every source text has the word banana, I wanted to distill that to its purest thing. So here, every line comes from a separate source text, includes the word banana, but every line is only 2 words. So every line is a new source text. And it just repeats the word banana over and over. And this might be a poem in the voice of a banana, I'm not sure. If you read it across the page, like horizontally, it would sound like this. Is banana, hunger banana, speckled banana, with banana, bullets banana, plant banana, the banana, first banana, tender banana, American banana, day banana. But if you just read it down the page, then it reads like, is hunger speckled with bullets, plant the first tender American day. To be in and of American tender. To be a domesticated object overripe as an empire. What ape among you bore the first desire? What manufactured nanostructure prevents grace blossoming? Rats gnaw fabrications like a president. Cue the canned applause. To be one of many, but small and bruised, like me, who will collect me when I am ready. More flowers, please. Okay. What wild flowers injure such sweet brown soil? Yellow flowers, purple flowers, red. How plump is the golden crown, the local children, healthy, grown, dead. Oh, endangered baby, lost amidst lush edos, do not plummet under global fluctuations. Another and another lonely breath caresses slender petioles in the deepening country. Yellow flowers, purple flowers, red. Inspect my tragic skin, my corky scab, the nation-sized ripe spots, our tender hours. Scale can make a wound seem smaller. And what was really wonderful about writing this poem was that I got to learn a lot about the really amazing and inspiring work that is going on in Central and South America, the work of indigenous leaders and union activists to kind of fight against, larger corporations that are taking up land in order to, prevent against disease, and that they're fighting to maintain their land, to, to keep their small farms. And so this is the voice of Hernan Bedoya. They demolished our house twice, once on Saturday and once again on Monday. On Monday, the very few of us that were left, together with the workers from the ranch, had to resist. That's how we managed to stay here until now. Now here, as you can see, we're growing bananas. We're growing only food, bananas, rice, corn. I don't have yucca. I planted it when I came back. But now I have pigs, and they eat the yucca. And maybe I'll just end with the voice of one of my my tios, end on like a personal note. My family is from, what kind of inspired me to make this, my family is Ecuadorian, from one of the quintessential quote unquote banana republics, though I hate to use that expression, because we're the banana republic, right? So part of like growing up in this is like knowing about this violence, but it's also like honoring and loving this thing so deeply. It took me a long time to write this. When I was telling my uncle about this, hey, I'm going to write about bananas. He said, Paul, do you know where the best bananas come from? I'm like, Tio, is it Ecuador? He's like, it is Ecuador. So, Tio Arturo, he asks if I know where the sweetest bananas come from. His voice sounds like the person I knew, burnished by hard years. His voice has a desert inside it. His answer is the sweetest bananas come from our country. His proof is he made his neighbors taste multiple bananas side by side. He has done this to his neighbors before. A lone howl tenderly clears the yellow tree of sparrows. May everyone have such love for what brought us here. Thanks.
Such a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you, Steven, for those wonderful introductions, and wonderful to read with Paul and Bill. So Tender Machine starts with an epigraph from Sylvia Plath's Bell Jar. I'm just going to read it quickly. So the main character is speaking to her doctor, and she says, I don't see what women see in other women. I told Dr. Nolan in my interview that noon. What does a woman see in a woman that you can't see in a man? Dr. Nolan paused. Then she said, tenderness. Here's a poem that I feel like is written especially for this evening. And it's called The Woman. An evening of expected rain. Out the window, clouds lifted their skirts and the wind poured in. We were the mothers lingering over the dessert tray, placing the sweets in our mouths one by one. We were the soothers and givers, keepers of children and men. Those days, our skin bunched up at the bra line, eyelids gathering like crinoline as it folds. Yet standing there at the table, there was nothing in the world we were in want of, not even the loves that had escaped us. Whatever we suffered, we let go of willingly. To know we were not the same woman as before did not pain us. When the others spoke, their voices swept over us like bees hovering over lilacs. Outside, lights strobed over the Hudson. We watched a white boat riding the crest of a wave, headed to sea. We felt an ache we realized was happiness, almost unbearable. Can y'all hear me okay? So shortly after this book came out, my first interview, I was being interviewed by a man, and he said, his first question was, what is the difference between tenderness in a woman and tenderness in a man? And I said, well, I'm not going to answer that question because I'm not a man. So let me read this. I think this keeps on falling. Sorry. Okay. So the one thing to know about this poem is there's the name of a Bach chorale and it's Ich ruf zu dir, and that means I call to you. Sunday woman on Malcolm X Boulevard. My lungs grow black lilies while I play Bach's Ich ruf zu dir on the spinet in the Harlem room. The light is getting longer and the one love I keep hoarding is still asleep while wildfires bloom a few miles away. He too must be locked in a room full of music, waking slow. From my window, I can see inside other windows where my sisters read the news of melting ice caps and the virus named after a crown. Other mothers and daughters tending their small plunders. They wonder how long to hold on to husbands, how to skin a chicken, how to tend a fire that burns thousands of miles away. I breathe, alveoli burning, many petaled in the dark. As a child, I used to stick my finger into the flower's stamen and lick, orange powder searing my lips. See how my desire thrives, feeding on every living thing. I think it's wonderful to read and to hear Paul's poems right before mine. So see it as it relates to this poem, which is called Fugue on the Maiden Name of My Mother. So I asked my mother as a child, why do we have a Spanish last name? Which my mother's maiden name is Flores. So she told me, the Philippines were colonized for 400 years under the Spanish. And she said, your ancestor, your great grandmother, she was living in a village and that had a priest residing over the village. And she said, out of all the women, she was his favorite concubine. So he gave her his name. So I started to think about that, this kind of complexity we have with naming, with lineage, how I'll never know what was in that relationship, if it was, if there was pleasure or no pleasure, if it was forced or not, and so these names we are handed down with, what we live with. So this is called Fugue on the Maiden Name of My Mother. There was a mad priest from Spain who impregnated women in the village. Among them, my great-great-grandmother was the favorite concubine, was given the surname Miraflores, which translates to look at the flower. Miraflores in legend is high romance. Miraflores, fountain girded, where the trees are many birded. Miraflores, name of beauty, may I earn a lover's duty. In Don Quixote, Miraflores was an ancient house. In its garden, Oriana felt no further shadow should fall upon her, raising hopes for my children's children, who will have a different name, dear colonizer, dear despoiler of my ancestors, now that you are dead and almost forgotten, with your priest's habit and hungry cock and your dazzling Philippine art collection, and I am left here to procreate, to recreate this history, my oppressor, my settler, my colonizer, my love. So it's funny that I didn't really realize this until a friend of mine, the poet Timothy Liu, who blurbed the book and has read so many of my poems over the years, said, you know, the earliest poem here was written directly after September 11, and the latest is kind of in the midst of this pandemic. So this book lives between the framework of these two disasters. I felt very stupid for not, you know, not knowing this as a poet, but I think that as we create, and I tell this to my students too, we have really no idea, you know, how these things will exist in the world in the future. So this, I'll just read a little bit of this small section. It's called Small Essays on Disappearance. Morning in the city and the performance that is Madison Avenue wearing diamond studs for breakfast. My eyelashes crop open and I rise believing in almost every god. I didn't expect life to be kind to me with my skin and secondhand pearls. At school, the other mother's lips are bud-like, melon pink on top of immaculate incisors. If I fixate on the other mothers, I see them as retrospectively luminous. What happens to the past after it loses its radiance? All my life sacrificed to the arrogance of cities, their empires of skin. Whittle of stilettos on the street, looming towers gathering dollars as they rise, ringtones vibrating and inaudible. The briefest glimpse people are the most beautiful. When the body is in pain, it reorients itself. Death takes us to third person, but I don't think I can stop writing about snow in the moments. White cool of milk, wine of street machines, Schubert steepling in my ear. The photo of the child, backpack sagging on her way to school, this static moment, my monocular vision of love, nostalgia blooming before the moment is even done, click, an instant swirling into disorder, click, this discrete parcel of time, click, the photo itself implying a world surging beyond its edges. It's just past 8:30 in the city, and I wanted to write a poem about currency, but it turned out to be about love. What I mean is to live, is to be rapacious, thicket of string quartets that sting and sing the street with its coffee-stained light. This instant of sight binding the world. Once I loved a woman, deciduous, before the towers fell. Before the towers fell, I loved for a time. Carried love around like a pacemaker. singing the concrete river. I loved the red thunder of her mouth, the demolitions blasting every block I ever lived. Clavicle and scapulae, clavier of spinal cord. I was carnivore for love, and yet I could not have loved. It was only touch to keep from disappearing. I think of the veins of arms, an exposure of aspen leaves on skin, the children on the grass, their voices rising. To keep myself present, I memorized their figures in the fields, orientation of cheeks and tiny feet. The day the towers fell, the sky was ultraviolet, the light blinded for an instant and then fell into the sea. Lace of branches overhead, masking the toxic industry of dollars, daughter. The trees are infrared and without fault tonight, and every day I think that we might die. I take you by the hand and music pours down the page. Hear how the subway trains slice through air. Pink stripes on your socks. Every day you are so tall, and I am such a small other. It's that time of year, I guess. Okay, I'll just read a couple more. I'll read the title poem and then I'll end with the poem called Coda. Tender machines. Though he designed mechanical birds, cloud ladders also used to besiege city walls. The hand then, which was Olympic in its grandeur, the shape of something identifiable, but not the same name as the river. She was like a crooked line of trees by the water that kept usurping your personal space. Though that memory was out of focus still, though he fit inside her mind like an exquisitely gloved hand. A previous moment, susceptible to being broken, but which became ultimately more human in the process. Yes, she would rather have that version of the film than relying on that memory. No, it was not her priori belief that any other human could be so beautiful. That is why the path of the light took on a third world quality. Yes, that is why she told him that when she was in love, she was more susceptible to the killing cold. How am I in time? I have no idea of time. I've lost track of time completely. Okay. So I guess I'll just end with the coda. And what is it you hate? She asked. Bureaucracy. And what is it you love? He asked. Rivers. They walked and walked until all the colors faltered. They drank until even the grass felt ill. So many days, so few words. And when it was dawn, nothing but birds flew out of their mouths. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Let's give the poets another round of applause. We have some books for sale. The poets will be signing books. Thank you so much for coming. If everyone could please help just move your chairs up against a wall, any wall. And thanks again.
My name is Sharpe. I really enjoy that. So nice. No, you just communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
No, you're fine.
Oh, thank